Welcome to the deep dive. When we communicate, especially on a pretty basic level, we kind of treat the interaction exactly like handing someone a map.
Right, like a literal piece of paper.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't mean a highly detailed, topographic map either. I'm talking about a black and white, purely functional printout.
Just the bare minimum.
Right. You hand over the data, it's got a few lines and street names, and the implicit message is just, here's the information, navigate it yourself.
Yeah, and if the person on the other end gets lost or, misunderstands the route well, that's on them.
Exactly. You did your job. You transmitted the data. But when you encounter a truly masterful communicator, someone operating at the highest levels, they don't hand you a paper map at all.
No, not at all. It's much more immersive.
Right. It's like they walk up, snap a virtual reality headset over your eyes, and just drop you into a fully immersive 3D world. You don't just see the raw data, you actually feel it.
You feel the gravity of it, yeah. You understand the texture of the environment.
And you're guided so effortlessly from one concept to the next that you don't even realize you're being led. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to entirely deconstruct the architecture of that immersive 3D level communication.
And, the most fascinating thing about this architecture is that it isn't native to anyone. Like, nobody is just born doing this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not some inherent personality trait. It's a highly specific engineered skill set. The framework we're actually dissecting today originates from a master class, and it was originally designed for individuals achieving C1 and C2 level proficiency in English.
Okay, so like top-tier language learners.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For context, that is the absolute highest tier of language mastery. It's the point where a speaker becomes practically indistinguishable from a highly educated native speaker, in their ability to express nuanced, complex thoughts.
Right.
But what becomes immediately apparent when you look at these frameworks is that they completely transcend language learning. This is fundamentally about human and cognitive processing.
I'm so glad you brought that up because when I was digging into the source material for this, I honestly completely forgot it was originally framed around language acquisition.
Oh, for sure. It applies to everyone.
Because what we're really talking about is, well, the native speaker who completely freezes up and gets tongue-tied in a high-stakes boardroom presentation.
Yep. Or the person trying to navigate a wildly delicate, emotionally charged disagreement with a partner.
Exactly. It's basically a manual for anyone who wants to stop just spitting out raw facts and start actually captivating the human brain sitting across from them.
Think about the last time you were in a meeting, right? You knew exactly what you wanted to say, the logic was perfectly aligned in your head.
But then you open your mouth,
and it comes out as this jumbled defensive paragraph. Your heart rate spikes, you see the other person's eyes glaze over, and you just know you've lost them.
Oh, I've been there. So many times. And that is the exact physiological reality we're fixing today.
Because, look, we are living in an era defined by a complete saturation of information. Everyone has the facts.
Right, I can pull up any statistical reality on my phone in 3 seconds.
Exactly. Therefore, simply being a transmitter of information, the person handing out that black and white map, is no longer a unique skill. Frankly, it's not even a highly valuable skill anymore.
So what is the superpower then?
Synthesis. It's the ability to take abstract, heavy concepts, package them with a highly calibrated vocal tone, and use them to foster balanced, empathetic dialogues that actually change minds.
Okay, so we've established that painting a 3D picture makes the message memorable. But before we can even begin to talk about navigating a complex debate with another human being, we have to look at the raw material.
The building blocks.
Right. We have to start with the first pillar of this architecture, which is the transition from facts to stories. Because why is it that some perfectly true, objectively accurate statements just, completely fall flat?
They just die in the air.
Yeah, while others resonate and embed themselves in your brain for years?
Well, this comes down entirely to how the human brain processes different types of linguistic input. There's a profound biological bottleneck here.
Okay, break that down for me.
So when you deliver a dry fact, let's imagine you're in a corporate seminar and you stand up and declare, time management is essential for productivity.
A very standard, boring sentence.
Right. When you say that, you are engaging a very specific, limited part of the listener's brain. You hit Wernicke's area and Broca's area, which are responsible for language processing.
So the brain is basically just acting as a dictionary in that moment.
Exactly. The listener's brain translates the words, acknowledges the English definition of time management, verifies the statement as logically true, and then immediately discards it.
It discards it.
Yeah, it's treated as background noise because it lacks a physical or emotional tether. It's devoid of human experience.
Wow, so it literally goes in one ear and right out the other because the brain is saying, okay, true, but irrelevant to my survival.
Precisely. The brain is ruthlessly efficient. If information doesn't have an emotional or sensory anchor, it does not get stored in long-term memory.
So how do we fix that?
By shifting from a fact to a narrative. When you do that, you trigger something called neural coupling.
Neural coupling, okay.
Instead of just stating the fact about time management, imagine you say, last quarter, I was handed the entire software integration project. Within 2 weeks, I was so overwhelmed I wasn't sleeping.
Oh, I'm already stressed just hearing that.
Right. And then you say, so I completely stripped my schedule, built a ruthlessly prioritized list of just 3 essential tasks a day, and we actually launched the integration a week early.
The difference there is night and day. Because as you say that, I'm not just processing the definition of words anymore. I am literally picturing you staring at a computer screen at 2 a.m.
Feeling that knot of stress in your stomach.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what is happening on a neurological level. You are no longer just activating the language centers. You are activating my sensory cortex.
So my brain is actually simulating your story.
Yes. When you mention being overwhelmed and not sleeping, the amygdala, the emotional processing center, lights up. When you talk about taking action, my motor cortex fires. We are now sharing a cognitive reality.
You've given them the VR headset.
Exactly.
And speaking of building that reality, the words we choose, they act as the specific pixels in that virtual world, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You can't build a high-definition experience with low-definition vocabulary, which is why moving from functional to expressive vocabulary is so critical in this framework.
It isn't just about sounding sophisticated. It's about accuracy of emotion. It's the difference between giving someone a general category and giving them a specific coordinate.
Right, like saying, I am very happy is functional. It covers a vast generic spectrum.
But an advanced communicator narrows the lens. They say, I am thrilled, which implies a sudden spike of high-energy joy. Or they say, I am fulfilled, which is completely different.
Right. Fulfilled is a deep, quiet, long-term satisfaction. I love the example from the source about swapping out the word hard.
Oh, that's a great one.
When someone says, this new project is going to be really hard, it instantly drains the energy from the room.
It sounds like a complaint.
It does. It sounds like a lament about suffering. But if you swap that single word and say, this new project is going to be incredibly challenging, you completely alter the psychological framing.
Because challenging implies an obstacle you can actually overcome. It implies growth.
The words you choose actively dictate the persona you project.
And this extends deeply into how we use idioms, too. Idioms are often taught as these quirky, decorative phrases you sprinkle in to sound natural.
Like the ball is in your court, or let's get the ball rolling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But linguistically, idioms serve a much higher functional purpose. They act as cultural shorthand. They're basically compression files for complex social dynamics.
Wait, what do you mean by a compression file?
Think about the cognitive load required to explain a shift in responsibility. You could say, I've completed all my assigned tasks, and now the progression of the project is entirely dependent on your subsequent actions.
That takes a lot of cognitive RAM to process. It's super clunky.
It is, but if you say, I've sent over the drafts, so the ball is in your court, you bypass the analytical processing entirely.
Oh, I see. You trigger an immediate shared visual understanding of a tennis match.
Right. The listener instantly feels the physical sensation of the ball arriving on their side of the net. You've transferred a complex dynamic in a fraction of a second.
That makes perfect sense. You're saving bandwidth. But this actually brings us to a major point about bandwidth, because a lot of what we have to communicate, especially in corporate environments, is totally invisible.
Abstract concepts, the most dangerous territory.
Yeah. We're dealing with massive things like supply chain synergy, algorithmic bias, emotional burnout. You cannot point to these things in a room.
And if you just tell an audience, the current economic landscape is creating a high degree of generalized anxiety, you are handing them a completely blank sheet of paper.
So how do you tether it? Because normally people just try to explain abstract concepts by using more abstract words, which just makes it worse.
You tether it through concrete metaphors. You map the invisible concept onto a physical object that everyone understands.
Okay, like what?
Well, traditionally, you might hear someone describe modern stress by saying, people are juggling too many spinning plates.
Which is an okay metaphor, but it's a bit of a cliche.
Right, and it doesn't illuminate the mechanism of the stress.
Because spinning plates just means you're busy. It doesn't capture the internal paralysis of modern burnout. So let's upgrade that.
Let's do it. What if you describe modern cognitive overload by comparing it to obsolete technology?
Ooh, I like this.
Instead of just saying people are stressed, you say the current environment means people are operating like high-end 4K video editing software running on a 10-year-old laptop.
Oh, wow.
The CPU is constantly pegged at 100%, the internal fan is screaming, the battery is draining in minutes, and just opening a single new browser tab threatens to crash the entire operating system.
That is a masterful metaphor, because you haven't just described the feeling you've explained, the mechanism of cognitive overload using a physical system we've all experienced.
The listener's brain instantly maps the frustration of a frozen computer onto the abstract concept of human burnout.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second. I'm putting myself in the shoes of a listener who lives and dies by efficiency. An engineer, a financial analyst, a busy executive.
Okay, sure.
If I walk into a tight 15-minute briefing and start telling personal stories about my sleep schedule and using tennis idioms and painting elaborate pictures about screaming laptop fans, I run a massive risk of sounding incredibly inefficient.
Like you're just rambling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In a high-stakes environment where time is literally money, shouldn't I just give them the bottom line?
This is the ultimate trap that analytical professionals fall into. They confuse word count with efficiency.
Meaning they think fewer words equals better communication.
Yes. They believe that delivering the fewest possible words in the shortest amount of time is the most efficient way to communicate. But efficiency in communication isn't measured by how fast you speak.
What is it measured by then?
It's measured by the accuracy and durability of the comprehension on the receiving end.
Explain that. Because taking 60 seconds to tell a story is objectively slower than taking 10 seconds to state a fact.
It is slower on the front end, yes. But let's look at the back end. Imagine an IT director says, we need to optimize our cross-departmental synergistic bandwidth to mitigate downstream friction.
Ugh, I've heard sentences exactly like that. It took 4 seconds to say.
Right, but because it is abstract jargon, nobody in the room actually visualizes the same outcome. The marketing team thinks it means fewer emails.
The engineering team thinks it means a new Slack channel.
Exactly. So what happens? You spend the next 3 months in misaligned follow-up meetings, dealing with compounded errors, trying to reverse engineer what the director actually meant.
Oh, I have lived through those exact scenarios. The illusion of communication took place, but no actual transfer of meaning happened.
Exactly. The efficient 4-second sentence just cost the company hundreds of hours. But if that same director uses a concrete metaphor, they ensure immediate, unified comprehension.
It front-loads the time investment, but delivers a massive payload of aligned data.
Yes, that is actual, measurable efficiency.
Okay, so we've established the raw materials. We know how to build the VR environment using stories, high-resolution vocabulary, metaphors. But having the right words mapped out is only half the battle.
Because there is a biological bottleneck between your mouth and their ear.
Right. If I deliver a beautiful high-definition metaphor about the overheating laptop with a completely flat, robotic monotone, what happens?
What happens is an acoustic mismatch, and it absolutely kills the visual you were trying to build. The human brain is constantly scanning for incongruence as a survival mechanism.
Wait, really? A survival mechanism?
Yes. If your words are signaling high urgency or deep emotion, but your vocal tone is signaling absolute apathy, the amygdala flags the message as unreliable noise.
So the listener subconsciously assumes you are either lying, reading from a script, or you just don't believe what you're saying.
Exactly. This brings us to the mechanics of delivery. How you acoustically format the message is often more critical than the text itself.
We're talking about the physical rhythm of speech. Stress and intonation. It's not just about trying to sound peppy.
No, it's about using your vocal cords strategically to highlight the structural architecture of your sentence. In English, acoustic stress can completely alter the definition of a sentence without changing a single word.
Oh, I know this exercise. The one about stealing the money.
Yes, let's do it. Think of the sentence. I didn't say he stole the money.
Right. 7 identical words, but it changes completely depending on which word you hit. Like if I say, I didn't say he stole the money, the implication is that someone else said it. But if I say, I didn't say he stole the money, I'm implying someone else stole it. And if I say, I didn't say he stole the money, I'm implying he stole the equipment or something else entirely.
Exactly. You are holding a fluorescent marker and guiding the listener's auditory processing to the exact locus of meaning. And this applies heavily to emotional resonance as well.
Right, like if you say, I really enjoyed the presentation today, with equal weight on every syllable, it sounds like a hostage reading a ransom note.
Exactly. But if you increase your volume, raise your pitch, and extend the vowel sound, I really enjoyed the presentation today, you are physically transmitting the residual energy of your enjoyment.
You're forcing the listener to mirror your emotional state. And it goes beyond just the vocal cords, right? There is a deep biological connection between your vocal tone and your physical body.
Well, you literally cannot separate them. The facial feedback hypothesis proves this.
So if your words say, I am absolutely thrilled about this merger, but your face is rigid, your jaw is tight, and your shoulders are hunched,
Your vocal cords will actually constrict. The listener's brain will bypass your words entirely and believe your tight jaw.
because the physical posture dictates the acoustic reality.
This is tied to the vagus nerve, which connects your facial expressions, your vocal cords, and your heart rate. When everything is aligned, the listener's nervous system relaxes because it senses authenticity.
But when there's misalignment, they feel an immediate, visceral sense of distrust, even if they can't explain why.
Exactly.
Okay, we've talked about sound and movement, but to me, the single most powerful mechanic of delivery isn't sound at all. It is the complete absence of it.
Ah, the strategic pause.
Yes. When I was reviewing the dynamics of world-class communicators in the source material, their use of silence blew my mind. It sounds so absurdly simple, just stop talking, but it is incredibly rare in practice.
It's rare because, for a novice communicator, silence feels like a threat. We are deeply conditioned to believe that silence during a conversation equates to failure.
Right, like it means you forgot your lines, or you weren't smart enough to keep up.
And when that silence hits, cortisol and adrenaline flood the system. The fight-or-flight response kicks in, creating an overwhelming urge to fill the void with anything.
Which results in rambling and filler words like and a rushed, anxious delivery.
It's panic speaking, but an advanced communicator overrides that biological panic.
To me, the strategic pause is exactly like the concept of negative space in art, or the silence between notes in a musical composition.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Right, because if a pianist just mashes all the keys down at the same time as fast as possible, you don't get music, you get chaotic noise. It is the deliberate empty space between the notes that actually gives the melody its shape. The silence is what gives the words that power.
When you utilize the strategic pause, you are manipulating cognitive load to your advantage. Let's say you drop a heavy, complex statement. The hardest part of this entire restructuring process is that we are going to lose institutional memory.
And then you stop.
You close your mouth. You hold eye contact.
Just let it hang in the air.
Exactly. You are granting the listener's brain the processing time to absorb the impact. Cognitive processing takes a fraction of a second. If you rush immediately into your next point, we're going to lose memory and also the budget is tight, you literally trample over your own profound thought.
You deny them the time to feel the weight of it. And from a psychological standpoint, holding that silence signals an immense amount of status and confidence.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you are demonstrating that you are entirely comfortable holding the attention of the room without making a sound. You aren't begging for their attention by speaking at 100 miles an hour.
This is incredibly potent when answering adversarial questions. If someone hits you with an aggressive question in a meeting, the instinct is to answer within a millisecond to prove you aren't intimidated.
But reacting that fast actually proves the opposite. It shows you're terrified of the silence.
Right, so you start babbling. By forcing a pause, saying, that is a critical question, let me consider that for a moment, and actually breathing in silence for 3 seconds, you instantly de-escalate the tension.
You lower your own heart rate, elevate your status, and flatter the questioner by showing their inquiry requires serious thought. It's an absolute power move, but it's framed as respect.
It really is.
Which is actually the perfect bridge to our next major pillar. Because up until this point, we have been operating in a bit of a vacuum. We've talked about our words, our metaphors, our tone, our pauses. But communication isn't a monologue.
The second you introduce another human being into this VR environment, you introduce friction.
Right. They have their own reality, their own stresses, their own counter-arguments. So how do we navigate the interpersonal dynamics when the other person starts pushing back?
This is the transition from the mechanics of performance to the diplomacy of interaction. And the absolute foundation of conversational diplomacy is active listening.
Now, active listening is a term that gets thrown around in corporate HR seminars all the time, usually defined vaguely as like, paying attention.
But in advanced communication, listening is not a passive state of receiving audio. It is a highly active, verifiable process.
I love that word, verifiable. Because sitting there quietly and nodding your head does not prove to the other person that you are actually absorbing their reality. You could be thinking about lunch.
Exactly. You have to provide proof of receipt. And the primary tool for this is paraphrasing. You literally reconstruct their core idea and hand it back to them.
So if a colleague says, I really feel like this new hybrid work schedule is totally destroying our team's creative momentum, you don't just say, yeah, I hear you.
No, you say, so from your perspective, the lack of spontaneous in-person time is actively hurting our ability to innovate.
It seems almost redundant when you first analyze it, like why repeat what was just said?
Because the psychological impact is profound. By paraphrasing, you are validating their internal reality. You're providing tangible proof that their neural output successfully entered your brain, was processed accurately, and was respected enough to be articulated back.
Which immediately lowers their defensive barriers.
And it's also an indispensable tool when dealing with complex jargon. If an engineer gives a highly technical explanation of a system failure and you respond with, so if I understand correctly, the API rate limit was exceeded, which caused a cascading database failure, right?
You clarify the reality for everyone in the room and you demonstrate deep intellectual respect for the speaker.
Exactly.
Okay, but I have a serious pushback here. I hear what you're saying about validating reality, but in a fast-paced environment, there has to be a threshold where this backfires.
What do you mean?
Like if my boss runs into my office and says, the main server just crashed and the website is down. And I look at her and say, so what I'm hearing is you believe the server is currently offline and you are feeling stress.
Oh, yeah. You'd be fired.
I'm going to get fired immediately for being an obtuse robot.
Yeah.
When does active listening cross the line into sounding patronizing?
That is a crucial distinction. Active listening and paraphrasing are tools designed for navigating subjective reality, opinions, and complex emotional states. They are not designed for objective emergencies.
Right. When the building is on fire, you do not paraphrase. You execute.
The threshold is defined by the nature of the information. If it's a subjective perspective, I feel like this project is failing, paraphrasing builds a bridge. If it's a hard operational fact requiring immediate action, paraphrasing is infuriatingly redundant.
So advanced communication is about hyper-situational awareness. You must read the room.
Absolutely.
That makes perfect sense. Use it for subjective friction, not objective fires. But let's talk about the hardest part of that subjective friction. Polite disagreement.
The danger zone.
Yes, because we have all been in conversations that instantly devolve into a toxic argument the second someone says, no, you're wrong. The ego flares up, the fight or flight response kicks in, and the conversation is functionally over. How do we disagree without triggering that biological alarm?
You have to utilize what we might call conversational judo.
Conversational judo.
Yes. In physical judo, if someone charges at you with force, you don't stand rigid and try to block them with a brick wall. You will get crushed. Instead, you accept their momentum, blend with it, and redirect it.
So verbally, what does that look like?
It means you never meet an opposing idea with immediate, blunt contradiction. You use specific structural templates. Instead of saying, that won't work, you say, I see exactly why you would approach it that way, but I'm looking at it from a slightly different angle.
Or, that is a really valid concern regarding the budget, but have we considered the long-term cost of not upgrading?
Exactly. Notice the architecture there. You always begin by affirming their contribution. You grant them the dignity of acknowledging that their point has merit.
You build a platform of mutual respect. Only after they feel seen do you introduce the pivot word, but, and present your counter perspective.
And this same judo philosophy applies to handling interruptions. Being interrupted is arguably one of the most universally frustrating experiences.
Oh, biologically, when someone cuts you off, it registers as a microaggression. It signals a loss of status. Most people either surrender and shut down, or they escalate by trying to shout over the interrupter.
Both reactions destroy the collaborative environment.
So how do you hold your ground without starting a shouting match?
You use a highly regulated, composed verbal redirect. When someone cuts across you, you maintain your volume, do not get louder. You maintain eye contact, and you deploy a phrase like, I completely understand your concern, but let me finish this thought so we have the full picture.
Or, that is a great point, and I will address it exactly in a moment. Look at the emotional regulation required there. You are not escalating the conflict, but you are absolutely not surrendering your space.
It demonstrates masterful emotional intelligence.
Okay, but again, devil's advocate here. If I'm in a heated discussion and every single time my colleague makes a point, I reply with, I see your point, but doesn't that start to sound incredibly passive-aggressive? Like I'm just reading from an HR script to patronize them.
Yes, it will absolutely sound passive-aggressive if it is used merely as a mechanical trick. Humans possess highly evolved deception detection systems. If you use the words, I understand your point, but your vocal tone is sarcastic and you're rolling your eyes.
The listener will immediately perceive it as weaponized politeness.
Exactly. The words mean nothing if the underlying intent is hostile.
So the difference between a patronizing script and advanced communication is actual empathy.
Precisely. Cognitive empathy. It is the genuine acknowledgement that multiple valid realities can exist simultaneously. When you say, that is a good point, the goal isn't to set a trap so you can win the debate. The goal is to acknowledge that based on their data, their perspective makes logical sense.
You're saying your reality is valid based on your inputs, and my reality is valid based on mine. Let us explore the space between them.
It shifts the paradigm from a gladiator match to a collaborative puzzle.
And navigating that puzzle gets exponentially more difficult when we zoom out and introduce cultural variables, because the very definition of what constitutes good communication changes depending on where you are on the globe.
It is a massive variable. We operate on a spectrum between low context and high context cultures.
Right, so in low context cultures, places like Germany, the Netherlands, or the US, communication is expected to be explicit, direct, and literal.
Efficiency and clarity are the highest virtues there. If you disagree, you state your disagreement plainly. In these environments, being overly polite or hedging your words too much can actually breed distrust. It looks like you're hiding something.
But if you take that exact same blunt communication style and drop it into a high context culture, say Japan or many parts of Latin America, you are going to cause a disaster.
A total disaster, yeah.
In those cultures, meaning is heavily embedded in context, relationships, and reading between the lines. Direct confrontation or a blunt no in a public setting causes catastrophic loss of face. It is shockingly offensive.
Exactly. Which is why rigid scripts fail. The true mark of an advanced communicator is hyper-adaptability. You must be able to read the room on a global scale.
Okay, so we've calibrated our delivery, we are actively listening, we are navigating the cultural friction with empathy. But what happens when the topic we are actually talking about is an absolute beast?
Deconstructing complexity.
Yeah. How do we structure our arguments when the subject matter, say, the ethics of AI or global supply chain logistics, is so dense that the listener is in danger of completely losing the thread?
When you are dealing with high-level topics, the burden of clarity rests 100% on the speaker. You cannot expect the listener to organize the data for you.
Right, because the human brain has a strict limit on working memory, the 7 ± 2 rule.
Exactly. If you just back up a dump truck of complex data and pour it all over the listener, their cognitive architecture will collapse. They will tune out. So you have to actively build scaffolding for them.
You have to act as the tour guide. And the first step is explicitly breaking things down. You don't just start listing statistics. You create a verbal table of contents.
This policy breaks down into 3 core areas: immediate tax implications, long-term funding, and environmental regulations. First, let's look at taxes.
You have instantly relieved their cognitive load. They know exactly where they are.
And as you move through that journey, you must explicitly connect the nodes using linking words. Words like because, as a result, conversely, and therefore.
Novice speakers often think these words are just grammatical filler.
But in complex argumentation, linking words are the load-bearing columns of your logic. If you say, interest rates are rising, housing starts are slowing down, you are forcing the listener to deduce the relationship.
But if you say, interest rates are rising as a direct result, housing starts are slowing down, you are holding their hand and walking them safely across the bridge of causality.
You are doing the heavy lifting so their brain doesn't have to.
But here is the part of navigating complexity that I found the most counterintuitive. When we are presenting arguments, we are constantly pressured to sound as confident and dominant as possible.
Especially in corporate settings.
Right. We are taught to project absolute certainty. But the frameworks for truly advanced communication heavily emphasize the exact opposite, the concept of hedging and nuance. We are supposed to soften our claims.
Yes, instead of saying, this strategy will definitely double our revenue, we are supposed to say, there is a strong probability that this strategy could significantly increase revenue.
Why would we intentionally sound less certain?
Because absolute certainty in a complex world is usually an illusion, and highly intelligent listeners know that. Novice speakers deal in absolutes. Always, never, definitely. They believe rigidity projects authority.
But advanced speakers understand that any complex system is subject to infinite variable.
Exactly. If you speak in rigid absolutes, you aren't projecting authority. You are projecting naivety or blind dogmatism.
I have an analogy for this that helped it click for me. Using absolute statements, "this will definitely happen," is exactly like driving a sports car with the suspension welded completely solid. No shock absorbers at all.
Okay, I like where this is going.
When the road is perfectly flat, it feels great. You feel fast and in control. But the second you hit a single bump, meaning the second someone introduces a valid counterargument or contradictory data, you crash. Your entire argument shatters because it was too rigid to absorb the impact.
But hedging your language is like installing heavy-duty shock absorbers on your argument.
Yes. You say, based on current trends, there is a strong possibility. Now, when you hit that unexpected counterargument, your argument just glides right over it. It flexes. It absorbs the new data without breaking.
The shock absorbers of nuance.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. By utilizing hedging, you are demonstrating intellectual humility. You're telegraphing that you possess the cognitive capacity to recognize edge cases and unseen variables.
Paradoxically, admitting that you don't possess absolute certainty makes you appear profoundly more trustworthy. But let me push back on this, because there is a real-world social dynamic we have to acknowledge. Does hedging run the risk of ruining your authority depending on who you are?
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of discussion about how women in cutthroat corporate environments are often penalized for using softening language. If a woman says, "I might be wrong, but perhaps we should try," she is often perceived as weak. Whereas a man who speaks in blunt absolutes is praised as a visionary leader. Does hedging actually hurt you in environments that worship dominance?
That is a very real, very complex sociological friction point, and you are entirely correct to bring it up. The key here is differentiating between tentative hedging and calibrated hedging.
Tentative versus calibrator.
Yes. Tentative hedging is driven by insecurity. Phrases like, "I'm not an expert, but," or "this might be a stupid idea, but," undermine your authority because they apologize for your existence in the conversation.
And that is damaging, regardless of gender, but often disproportionately weaponized against women.
Exactly. Calibrated hedging, however, is driven by precision, saying, "The data strongly suggests," or "given the current parameters, it is highly probable." Does not sound weak. It sounds like a scientist. It projects analytical rigor.
You are not apologizing for your idea. You are defining the exact mathematical limits of your certainty. That commands respect in any boardroom.
It's precision versus insecurity. And speaking of precision, the ultimate tool for navigating these complex debates isn't actually making statements at all. It is asking questions, specifically open-ended rhetorical framing.
Right. The quality of the information you receive is entirely dependent on the quality of the question you ask. Novice communicators ask binary, closed questions. Did you like the proposal?
The answer is yes or no. The conversational energy hits a brick wall.
But advanced communicators ask questions designed to map the other person's cognitive terrain. Instead of, "Did you like the proposal?" they ask, "What aspects of the proposed timeline do you foresee causing friction with your current workflow?"
You are giving them a massive canvas to paint on. You're inviting them into a dynamic exploration. You're essentially saying, let's sit on the same side of the table and look at this complex problem together.
When you synthesize all of this, the breaking down, the linking words, the shock absorbers of hedging, and the open-ended questions, you are no longer just participating in a debate, you are orchestrating a shared intellectual discovery.
You become the trustworthy guide through the wilderness of complexity.
Okay, so we have designed the ultimate blueprint. We know the neuroscience of storytelling, the biology of pauses, the verbal judo for disagreement. It's a spectacular toolkit. But this brings us to the final, and frankly, the most intimidating section.
The path to mastery.
Yes. Because reading a blueprint is very different from building the house. How does a normal, stressed-out human being actually internalize all of this? How do you go from consciously remembering to use a metaphor to just doing it effortlessly in real time while your heart is pounding?
The chasm between theoretical understanding and unconscious competence is where most people quit. Knowing the rules is academic. Performing them under pressure requires physical and neurological adaptation. To achieve this, we have to look at a rigorous process of immersion, specifically a technique known as shadowing.
Shadowing. This is where you find audio of a master communicator, maybe a podcast host or a CEO you admire, and you literally repeat their sentences out loud right after them, trying to match their exact cadence.
Yes. The goal of shadowing is not to memorize their vocabulary. It is to bypass your analytical prefrontal cortex and directly train the physical apparatus of your speech, your lungs, your vocal cords, your mouth.
You're building muscle memory.
By mimicking their exact rhythm, their pauses, and their intonation, you are forcing your body to experience the physical sensation of advanced delivery.
But let's be totally honest about this. I've tried this. It is incredibly, excruciatingly awkward.
Oh, it's the worst.
Right. Imagine pacing around your living room, listening to an hour-long geopolitical podcast, and just echoing the sentences to your cat. You feel like a parrot. You feel ridiculous. How do you get past the psychological barrier of feeling like an idiot?
The expert advice here is to fully, deeply validate that feeling. It is profoundly awkward. You are an intelligent adult, and you are essentially reverting to the learning mechanics of a toddler.
When a toddler learns to speak, they babble. They mimic sounds without fully grasping the complex meaning.
Exactly. Shadowing is structured, advanced babbling. You have to swallow your ego and accept the awkwardness, because it is the only way to build the myelin sheaths around the new neural pathways in your brain. You are fundamentally rewiring how your brain connects thought to acoustic output.
Rewiring the hardware. And you don't always have to do it out loud either. The framework suggests supplementing this with a constant internal monologue.
Right, lower the stakes.
When you are doing the dishes or driving to work, you actively narrate your environment using the upgraded vocabulary, the complex metaphors, and the linking words. You're practicing the formulation of thought without the pressure of an audience staring at you.
It is a low-stress simulation. But eventually you have to leave the simulation. You have to embrace the friction of real-time interaction, which means you have to radically reframe how you view mistakes.
Because if you are paralyzed by the fear of using the wrong word or pausing too long, you will retreat to your basic, safe, functional communication.
You'll just hand them the black and white map.
Exactly. To really crystallize this brutal, beautiful journey from theory to mastery, I want to look at a highly specific case study from the source material. The story of a professional named Maria.
Oh, Maria's situation is incredibly common. She was a highly intelligent professional who had put in the academic work. She possessed a deep, vast vocabulary and perfect grammatical knowledge on paper.
But when she was placed in the crucible of fast-paced corporate meetings, her academic knowledge collapsed.
She was overwhelmed by the speed, she couldn't track complex arguments, and she spent the entire meeting just trying to survive the cognitive load.
She had the data, but she couldn't load the VR headset. So she started applying this rigorous architecture. She started the agonizingly awkward process of shadowing economics podcasts in her apartment.
At first, she tried to capture every single word, which exhausted her. But eventually, she shifted her focus. She stopped trying to catch the individual pixels and started focusing on the rhythm, the big ideas, the strategic pauses.
She practiced the internal monologue on her commute, and then she threw herself into the fire of actual unscripted language exchanges,
where she practiced active listening, paraphrasing, and calibrated hedging. And this relentless, multi-layered immersion culminated in a very specific event, the dinner party breakthrough.
This is my favorite part. Maria is at a dinner party with her colleagues. It's a loud, dynamic environment, the exact kind of chaotic setting that used to paralyze her. The conversation shifts to travel, and someone asks her about a recent trip she took to the mountains.
Now, normally, her brain would panic. Describing a landscape requires complex narrative structure.
But this time, something is different. She just opens her mouth and starts talking. And she isn't just reciting facts, she's painting the masterpiece. She effortlessly weaves in these complex sensory words describing the peaks as majestic, the air as serene, the view as breathtaking. She commands the room.
But the breakthrough wasn't just that she used impressive words. The true breakthrough was the profound psychological realization she had in the middle of that conversation. As she was speaking, she suddenly realized what she wasn't doing.
She wasn't constructing the sentence in her native language in her head, frantically searching for translations and then pushing them out. The translation filter was entirely gone.
Exactly. The neural pathway had become so reinforced that the language bypassed the analytical translation center entirely. She was generating thought directly in the target language.
It had become her natural, uninhibited mode of existence. It was the water she was swimming in.
That is the biological definition of true fluency. It is the moment the VR headset becomes your actual eyes.
What a monumental shift. Okay, we have traversed an unbelievable amount of intellectual territory today. Let's build the summary scaffolding for our listener. We started by exploring the raw materials of connection, understanding that facts only hit the language centers, but telling a concrete story triggers neural coupling.
We learned to ditch cliches and use high-definition mechanical metaphors like the overheating laptop to make abstract concepts unforgettable.
We decoded the biology of delivery. We examined how acoustic stress acts as a verbal highlighter and how mastering the negative space of the strategic pause manipulates cognitive load and projects absolute confidence.
We stepped into the friction of human interaction. We established that active listening requires verifiable proof through paraphrasing. We learned the verbal judo of polite disagreement.
And we tackled the architecture of complexity, learning to lower the listener's cognitive load by explicitly breaking arguments down, using linking words, and installing the shock absorbers of calibrated hedging.
And finally, through Uriah's story, we learned that the only way to physically wire these skills into your nervous system is to embrace the profound awkwardness of shadowing and internal monologues.
Listen, whether you are preparing to ask for a massive promotion tomorrow, whether you are trying to de-escalate a deeply personal argument at your kitchen table tonight, or whether you are literally learning a new language yourself, this architecture is available to you. You can start building these 3D environments today.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, highly provocative thought, inspired by Maria's breakthrough. When Maria achieved that state of unconscious competence, she didn't just access a new list of vocabulary words.
She accessed a new framework for processing reality.
There is a concept in linguistics called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which suggests that the structure of a language determines a native speaker's perception and categorization of experience.
Wait, meaning the words you know dictate what you are actually capable of feeling.
Precisely. If you only possess basic functional vocabulary, your ability to process complex emotional or intellectual states is fundamentally bottlenecked. But if you deliberately acquire highly nuanced vocabulary and you master advanced communication, you are literally expanding the neurological boundaries of your own consciousness.
Whoa.
It begs the ultimate question. If you change the architecture of how you communicate, do you fundamentally change the nature of what you are capable of thinking? Are the limits of your language, in fact, the absolute limits of your world?
That is heavy. It makes you realize that mastering this isn't just about persuading other people. It's about upgrading the operating system of your own mind. It's about finally stepping fully inside that immersive 3D world and realizing that for the first time you have the tools to describe absolutely everything you see.